Good evening, everyone. I know we've got a few more folks coming in. We got about a minute before the official start. I already see a few familiar faces. Nice to see everyone again.
Good evening. It's Phil Schaefer, the Mayor of East Tavistock. Glad to be here. I have to jump off in about 40 minutes, but look forward for presentation as long as I can attend. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to start to share my screen as we wait for some folks to join. Please just let me know if you can see my screen. Perfect, thank you. Okay, I'm seeing 6 o'clock. Tony, would you like us to start here? I think that's probably good to go.
Yes, please, Nelson, proceed.
Perfect. And I'm going to hand it over to David. David, I'm not sure if you started the recording. We're doing that so that we can post this for those that weren't able to attend and to be able to listen to us talk through the slides, but also to hear some of the questions that could come up throughout.
Yes. Hi, Nelson. Hi, everyone. The meeting has already been set to record, so it's already going. Welcome everyone to this Public Consultation Centre for the Village of Tavistock new water supply well project. This is a Municipal Class Environmental Assessment study. This is the second of the Public Consultation Centres, the last one being last December. Welcome to everyone that is taking some time out this evening to hear more about this. We'll do a couple introductions as well. My name's David Kielstra. I'm an environmental planner with Stantec. And we've been retained to work on this project. The individual that welcomed everyone before is Nelson Oliveira, who's the project manager for Stantec. We've also on the call have Tony Latimer, who's with the County of Oxford. Tony, did you want to say a few words before we keep going?
No, not really, David. You're doing fine. I'm the project manager on the county side for this. Now, Nelson's the project manager at Stantec. We work together.
Sure. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll keep going with that, and there'll be an opportunity. Well, we can talk more about that, but why don't you flip to the next slide, Nelson? This Public Consultation Centre is really an opportunity to share with the public more about this project, and we want to hear from you. That's the whole reason we're here, talking about this project. So we really do value your feedback on what you're about to see here, and also just to make sure that we understand any of your your comments, and we can ask some follow-ups as well, just to make sure the project team is aware. So there's a few ways to do that. The raise your hand function, I'll show you in a minute on the next slide where that is. Raise your hand is a great tool where you can ask a question, just like back in school. You can press that button and it'll illuminate the raise hand, and we'll get to your question when it makes sense to do so. There will be an opportunity for comments at the end, though. There's also an opportunity outside of this to submit your comments by email or phone. We're going to be posting the slides after the meeting, so you'll be able to look at any of this stuff. So if anyone's feverishly writing everything down, stop, and what we can do instead is you can look through the material at your leisure and provide an email or a phone call. There's also the Speak Up Oxford consultation platform. You can scan that QR code on there just with your cell phone, take sort of a photo of it, and it'll link you to the Speak Up Oxford site. So lots of ways to provide contact information's there as well on the bottom. So next slide. Okay, so just some housekeeping items. We will keep the microphones and videos off just for call quality, and also just to keep the presentation portion in order. There will be also an opportunity at the end for more of a Q&A, question and answer period, and we can review some of the submitted comments. There's a Q&A button there. You can see that highlighted. So you can click on there at the top of your screen here and provide a comment, and we'll be monitoring that through the call. And there's that raise your hand logo as well, so you can just click that if you do have a question. And there's a little disclaimer at the bottom. This meeting is being recorded. By participating in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded, just so you're aware. And next slide. And I'll just go through the purpose before I turn it over to Nelson. So the purpose of this meeting, like I said, there was one prior, this meeting is to provide an overview of the study process and update, to also look to finalize the alternative servicing solution for the new well and identify and evaluate the alternative design solutions. And we can talk more about what that means as we go along. The third purpose is to describe the preliminary preferred alternative design, based on the evaluation, and to provide an opportunity for you to learn more about the project and to get involved. And with that, over to you, Nelson.
Perfect. Thanks, David. I'm just going to shut my camera off because I don't want to push the limits of any sort of connection since I've got a few slides to talk about. So I will do that. I'll ask David that I may miss then any raised hands. So David, if you can let me know, because I'll have some notes on my other screen. So that'd be great.
Absolutely.
If you want to get input, ideally if we can get it at the end, that's great. But if there are questions, we want to make sure we capture them. All right, so next slide. So essentially the project overview, as David had mentioned, the first step in our presentation today. So essentially, what are we doing? Well, this study is seeking to explore the water supply system in Tavistock, specifically to determine a preferred servicing and design solution to obtain additional water supply and storage capacity to address current and future needs. So why are we doing it? Well, it's kind of in what I just kind of noted there. So we want to look at providing redundancy and security within the existing water supply system, and that includes the wells that are within the center of the town and its storage. We want to support future development growth in the Village of Tavistock, because that's essentially, that's a core thing for any community, is to accommodate growth. We want to identify the preferred location and configuration for the new water supply well. So really figuring out what location makes sense and what that location is going to look like and how it integrates into the system. And then we also want to address the need for additional water storage and the need for pressure equalization. And these were things that evolved throughout the study and also other studies that were ongoing within the county at the time. So these things really dovetailed together as this project evolved. And what does it mean to you? Well, Oxford County is planning for the future, as I noted, so that residents and businesses can continue to have access to a safe and reliable water supply. And that's both water supply in terms of well source in this case, and of course storage, which is part of that to make sure that we can address specific high demand needs in the system. So just moving to the next slide. All right, so this study is following the Municipal Class Environmental Assessment process, specifically following what is called the Schedule C Class EA steps. And that involves completing phase 1 to 4 as shown below. And you can kind of see it here if I can show you. And we're right here today. As noted, this process involves opportunity for the public, agencies, and other key stakeholders to provide input through 2 public consultation centers. And this one is the second of the 2. And as David had mentioned, we had one actually in December of last year. And there's also an opportunity, you know, not just after this presentation or in the comments that may follow within the period, which we'll share later on, but also as part of the 30-day review of the ESR. So the ESR stands for Environmental Study Report, and essentially that's the overall report that summarizes the study and its recommendations. All right, I'm going to step a little bit back here. I see a lot of familiar faces, which is fantastic, but I'm also just going to step back to explain the system again. So some of this came from the public meeting from before. So for those that have seen this, you know, we'll get through this quick. For those that haven't, just want to bring you back on board. So at present, the existing system is serviced by 3 wells. Of the 3, 1 is a groundwater well and 2 are considered bedrock wells. And essentially we service about just shy of 3,400 people, or about 1,289 service connections within the current settlement area. All 3 current wells are located adjacent to the elevated water tower that is used for storage, and that's right in the heart of the town there. And it's also, so it's not only used for storage, but it's part of the disinfection process, and it also helps to meet the peak demands in the system. The current treatment includes the addition of sodium silicate, and that's used for iron and manganese sequestering. That's something that you've got naturally in your water source, as do a lot of systems in Ontario. And we also add sodium hypochlorite for disinfection. So key items related to the existing system includes the fact that the 2 bedrock wells, which are also known as wells 2A and 3, they are not allowed to operate at the same time, and that's a condition of the existing permit to take water, which is issued by the MECP, which is the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks. So essentially, by taking 1 well off, that reduces our water supply capacity for Tavistock as it is. So based on the larger well out of service, which is a means of establishing what we call firm capacity, this reduces the actual capacity of the Tavistock system to just over 4,000 cubic meters per day. As noted in the last point below in blue, the existing max day flow is already at around 2419 and growing, and as noted, that's just going to get compounded over time as development proceeds. That's just a study area map. If you can see it right here, that is our existing facility, which is the elevated tower in the wells. All right, so the following provides a further overview of the specific problems and opportunities developed for this study, following the review of the existing system and based on additional inputs throughout the planning process. Now, the reason we define problems and opportunities is to provide a basis to identify and assess our solutions. So solutions should look to address existing problems, and also provide opportunities to improve servicing wherever possible. So key elements are noted as follows. So the first thing is security. You know, the current 3 water supply wells are in the same location. So the potential disruption to the facility, if something was to occur there, would have a large impact on the ability to supply Tavistock itself. The next one is growth planning. You know, with an additional residential of about 620 homes and employment of about 19 hectares, we need to make sure that we've got the ability to service that sort of planned growth to about the 2047 mark and beyond. Now, the county estimates that, the county estimates suggest that the max day demands will reach about 4,100 by 2046, exceeding the current capacity. If you remember what I said about firm capacity, well, that would already exceed it, meaning that we would already have a deficit at that time. And the official planned population residential growth trends indicate the max day of about 4,114 could exceed capacity as early as 2036. So, as noted, we need to really be ahead of this and really understand that there's going to be a water deficiency at some point if we don't deal with this now, and it may stunt the ability to grow. So essentially, our problem and opportunity statement, which was the overall statement that guided the EA process, was as follows. The Village of Tavistock currently receives water services from 3 wells located within the center of the village near Queen's Park. The county has initiated a municipal class environmental assessment to explore potential opportunities for new well supply and storage to improve the security and supply of drinking water to the community. So this gets used throughout the process as we develop solutions, and we measured it against the statement to see how they perform. I am getting a little bit of background noise. If perhaps somebody can mute, please, that'd be great. Thank you. All right, so again, stepping back a little bit for those that weren't able to attend the December meeting or to review any of the material, this is the second public meeting. At that first meeting in December, we defined several alternative solutions to provide long-term water servicing to Tavistock. The preferred solution was to construct a new well in a different location for the reasons as noted. So one is the localized footprint for infrastructure and construction-related impacts such as noise, traffic, and aesthetics. And we looked at that because we had solutions like bringing in water from another community, which would be a much larger impact. So that's why, that's the note to compare to that sort of alternative. Less pumping infrastructure than sending water from another community. Reduced impact to the natural environment because, again, we were looking at more of a consolidated footprint for the preferred servicing solution. Through the initial part of the studies, we actually advanced 3 test production wells, and the results of those wells looked favorable that we could find a source. And then ultimately, this solution, which was a new well at another location, would help address the growth potential within Tavistock, as I noted before, and also meet some of the other objectives or problems as noted in the problem and opportunity statement. And the last thing we didn't want to forget is a big part with Oxford County is that they have a very proactive water conservation practice in place. And much like their other systems, anything that gets implemented here, we'd be looking to integrate as much of those initiatives as possible so that we can, minimize the sort of draw that we do have on our groundwater sources. So again, stepping back a little bit. So based on the preferred servicing solution being a new well, further investigation was then undertaken to evaluate the performance of each of those test wells that were advanced. As a result of that analysis, Site W3, which is adjacent to the North Optimist Park, was deemed to be the preliminary preferred location for the new well for the reasons as noted. And I'll quickly go through those. It maintained the preferred localized footprint, as we noted. More importantly, the well showed extremely good potential for supply. We note here about 40 liters a second with the possibility of even getting more out of it. And again, there was minimal environmental impacts and avoids designated natural environmental features that some of the other sites had slightly higher concerns with. So really at the end of this slide, we're really bringing us up to what we had presented at the December 2022 meeting. And again, for those that weren't able to attend, or as a reminder for those that were there in December and joining us today, and it really starts sort of the launch process for the next part of this presentation. And on that note, so after we presented this, we then solicited input. So a lot like what we're saying that we want to do after this presentation is we did hear back from you. And this is what we heard following PCC number 1. So the first question was the discussion of the land parcel where W3 is located was provided to the township originally for use as a road right away. And I'm sure this may come up. And again, David, I don't know if there's any hands up that have come so far, but so the township of East Tavistock permitted the use of W3 property for the testing purposes. There was long-term use of the property may affect further negotiation. We understood that, and that was as much with the town itself, and that the property extents would be confirmed in later phases. So these were the responses that we had provided at that time when we did review W3. I know the county had subsequent discussions with the town that we can discuss at a later time in this presentation, but that was one key question that came up during the presentation and followed. An individual also identified W1 used as the former town reservoir and asked if it could be repurposed. County staff did identify, and I think Tony had some definite background there that he recalled, but that the site was decommissioned actually due to water quality issues. And in fact, it was actually less productive than the other sites. And that was based on the updated pump test that we did about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. So there are a lot of reasons that we didn't really look at W1 as being a preferred solution. And then of course, with W3 having really good water yield, ability to really get additional water supply to supplement the 3 wells that will continue to operate as well. And the other question we did receive at that time was individuals asked if the parcel close to Hope Street West was the confirmed site. And as you can see here, yes, W3 is one that we're looking to advance. We'll continue to refine that in the next few slides. And the project team did identify that the well may or may not be on the road easement parcel, and that we would confirm that. And that's what we're doing today. So a lot of these questions then became a part of the subsequent sort of evaluation, subsequent discussions that the county and or Stantec undertook as well, and evolved the process that you'll be seeing shortly. All right, so before we get into design solutions, we identified that at the end of that December meeting, we noted that W3 was the preferred location because the test well there had a lot of benefits in terms of water supply and all that. The next thing we really needed to do is say, okay, well, site W3 has the potential to advance a production well, but how is that production well really going to integrate with the rest of the Tavistock system, given that we've got an existing system in terms of wells and treatment and storage within the center of town? So before we jumped into, site-specific solutions, we looked at a refinement or further refinement of the servicing solution. So that's saying, okay, it's W3 for the well, but again, what's that next step? How does that well integrate? And we looked at 2 options that are noted in the next couple of slides. The first is what we call a centralized treatment solution. So this option basically includes advancing the production well on site W3, likely having a well pump house there so that we can house all the electrical and all the other stuff, and then sending the water through a dedicated water main that would then connect into the existing system in the center of town. And as you can see here in this image, hopefully you can see it clearly, that would be the site W3. And we showed a couple of different alternatives to get to where that elevated tower is. You can somewhat see it there. It's this hatched parcel, more or less. And another option here, in and around about a 1 kilometer distance to get from one end to the other. It's about 1 kilometer here, a little bit further to come down the blue line. So the benefit of this one potentially would be to try to centralize storage in one location, and rather than having 2 separate sites and whatnot. And as I noted here, the 2 options that were reviewed. The next alternative, which we call servicing option B, was looking at what we call decentralized. So essentially, this option includes both the installation of the production well at W3 and also the construction of a treatment facility on that parcel as well. So it would be a building with some tankage, not just to address the system storage we need, but other tanks just to address part of the treatment process. But essentially everything would be located on that one site, more or less, with a connection to the Hope Street water main just in front of the facility. And from that, so various design options that would consider the ultimate flow capacity, and we note here 50. You noticed before it said 40. We did see that the capacity of the well could reach upwards about 50 to be confirmed. The sizing and type of water storage could also be built on site, as I noted. And a few other things. Results of initial groundwater testing to determine the treatment needs. So that was all incorporated in that sort of decentralized treatment solution that you'll see, and ability to maintain trail access off Hope Street. So as we evolve these elements, once we made a decision, all of these things needed to be considered on whether we were looking at centralized versus decentralized treatment. So before we jumped into the evaluation, each of those surfacing solution options, that's again A and B, were assessed against the evaluation criteria established early on in the study, which is consistent with the Municipal Class EA process. And this means that we evaluate things against what we call the broader definition of environment, as the ministry defines it. And that's not just natural environment, but that's cultural environment, social environment, technical environment, and also consideration for financial implications, both in terms of construction costs and long-term operation. So all of these things were then reviewed, or these evaluation matrices were developed early on in the process, used again when we were evaluating the two sub options, option A and option B, with using well W3. The following table provides a summary of that evaluation. So again, it's a qualitative assessment that looked at both options. As you can see here, the social environment, design option A was moderately preferred versus most preferred for option B. And the reason for that is the centralized treatment, which required the dedicated water main about at least 1 kilometer, if not about 1.2 kilometers. There'd be a lot of disruption to residents and businesses to construct that water main. We'd be tearing up roadways. We'd have obviously access restrictions and whatnot. So whereas the other location with the decentralized was very site specific. Cultural environment, again, generally the same reasons, but more specifically, there's a couple of cultural features along the routes, including a cemetery in one area and a few significant heritage plaques and structures that we would have to avoid. Again, with the site W3, everything was contained. Natural environment, it was moderately preferred over most. And the reason for that is that there's still going to be impacts on site W3. So can't really avoid that with either option, but potentially we're getting into dewatering and whatnot, which could cause some other natural environment concerns. In terms of technical, the real difference there was that while we looked at centralized treatment, the existing site is already somewhat restricted in size, and adding in the additional flow means that anything that's done there to upgrade treatment in the future for those existing 3 wells, well, the entire system has to get that much larger if we're sending in this 40 to 50 liters a second from site W3. And it's at a tipping point that site may not be able to house all the equipment necessary in a facility with the dedicated storage and all that other stuff that's needed. In terms of financial environment, again, a difference here because the facility, one way or another, would have to be constructed to treat the water, but we're into at least a 1 kilometer water main construction, including road restoration. So for all of these reasons, the alternative design option B, which was the decentralized option, was determined to be preferred. And this sort of set the tone for then coming up with design concepts that we'll be presenting. So very high level, again, summary. For decentralized, the solution could be designed with consideration for current and future treatment requirements. It's still a localized footprint, and we saw the benefits in the evaluation that we were able to keep things really onto that property with minimal impacts to residents and businesses, compared to the other centralized treatment. Avoids the need for significant water main installation within the existing right-of-way. And the challenge there is that we'd be actually adding in a raw water main in the roadway with treated water mains and storms and sanitary sewers. It becomes a very congested right-of-way, which makes long-term maintenance and whatnot, and even further construction much more difficult for the county long-term. And then ultimately, the solution addressed those problem and opportunity statements. It really addresses the local growth potential. We're able to address the system storage. Its location's also close to a heavy water user, so we can look to mitigate pressure fluctuations that we're witnessing. And whatnot. And it ends up too, as I mentioned, a lot of our study work was working hand in hand with other studies ongoing. And for reference, it's also consistent with the ongoing water and wastewater master plan, which is currently in draft. All right, so based on the preferred servicing solution being a decentralized approach, we then evolved in looking at design concepts with that site. And in total, you know, we actually looked at 6 design concepts. There's actually a few more because there's some sub options here, which I'll go through. And I'll take the time now, and I apologize, might get a little bit in the weeds here, but better to be able to share this just so everyone's got a good understanding. So alternative number 1 here, and hopefully you can see my cursor right here. So in this option, we have what we call 2-stage pumping. I'm going to define that right now because that's going to be consistent to all the options. What that means is essentially we'd be pumping from the well and into the building through treatment and then into some form of storage. And then from there, we'd have to pump again to get it out into the system. That's why we call it 2-stage pumping. In this case, though, we'd have 2-stage pumping with an on-ground storage tank or standpipe in the back of the building. And then we would also use iron sequestering to deal with the iron and manganese that we discovered in the testing, which again is very consistent with the other groundwater sources, the existing sources that you have there. In this situation, it would be likely the smallest building footprint at about 8 meters by 10 meters, except it would have the additional storage in the back of it. In alternative 2, it's very much the same as alternative 1. The building's about the same size, except the storage would be generally buried here. And by the way, if you see that little rectangle here, that would be for a generator. So we just showed that for all of our options. So this option, alternative 2, same sort of thing, iron sequestering, 2-stage pumping, except we would have buried storage instead of having the storage, what we call on grade. Now, it gets a little bit more tricky when we get to alternative 3A and 3B. So again, consistent with the 2-stage pumping, in this case, we are maintaining the iron sequestering, but we're also considering either split stream or full stream IX treatment. Now, before I jump into the rest with storage, I'm going to quickly define that, which is down here. So IX refers to ion exchange. And the reason for that is that the province has been proposing potential changes to some of the regulatory standards for water quality. And if any of those were to potentially be implemented, it's a possibility that the well source would require some additional treatment in the form of ion exchange. The second thing I want to define is split stream versus full stream. So split stream means that essentially when the well water comes into the building, we would take a portion of that water and pass it through the ion exchange, and the other portion would not pass through it. And then ultimately downstream, they would blend together. So it's essentially a means of achieving the water quality objectives by more or less diluting the partially treated flow with essentially the flow that's not treated. And this is used widely throughout. Sometimes we just need enough treatment to just slightly lower it below the regulatory limits. So it's a viable solution that also reduces cost and footprint and everything else long-term with operations. And so in this solution, you can see here a little bit of an eye test, but the building gets a little bit bigger because we're including additional storage. And this option also includes the in-ground.
Nelson, before we move on, just for anyone having trouble seeing some of the diagrams, the system does allow you to zoom in. If you hover your mouse over the slide, in the bottom corner, there's beside the name of the presenter, there's a plus and a minus symbol. So you can always press that if you want to zoom in on anything specific now, or we can also come back to it if you have any further questions. I know some of the text is a little small in there, but just thought I'd point that out for accessibility reasons.
Perfect. Thanks, David. That's a really good point. And actually, it's perfect timing because I almost missed a little thing. So when we're bringing in the additional treatment with ion exchange here, you can see a little bit of tankage here. It's not necessarily going to be here. It could be elsewhere on the site, but we may need to have some tankage to hold what we call the backwash water because it's part of regenerating filters and ion exchange units. And then that eventually gets discharged to the sanitary sewer. So a little bit more infrastructure when we go to this option. So remember, this one was the in-ground option. So as I go to the next slide, it's the exact same essentially as options 3A and 3B, where we've got the two-stage pumping, iron sequestering, which is again just injecting sodium silicate to essentially get the iron and manganese to not oxidize out, but it stays in the water. Either split stream or full stream ion exchange, as I defined before, but the difference here in this alternative is that instead of in-ground storage, we would have, again, the standpipe and essentially in the back of the property, more or less, so that it's tucked away a little bit more. So more or less the exact same option as you saw with 3A and B, except the difference is in how we address the system storage needs that we need. As we go into 5A, this is where we start to see a bit more of a difference, because where we had before the iron sequestering, which is the sodium silicate, now we're replacing that process and we're looking at essentially iron and manganese filtration. So the county has these filters throughout on a lot of their systems. So that's essentially the big difference there. Again, the two-stage pumping stays the same. We're reviewing the split stream versus full stream. And this option has the in-ground storage below it. As you can see, the buildings are getting bigger because now we've got a few more filter vessels to deal with iron and manganese filtration, and then either partial or either split stream or full stream treatment for ion exchange if and when it's ever needed. So the building potentially gets a little bit bigger when we go there. We obviously still in these options have the backwash equalization tank and whatnot, and storage again is underneath. And then ultimately, when you get to 6A, again, very similar to 5, except the big difference here is the storage. So a lot of these, as you can see, they evolved from the very, I wouldn't call it bare minimum, certainly not, and because everything's got to still address the current regulations. But from alternative design option 1, which didn't really have the ability to add filtration and add ion exchange. So it had its pros in some ways, but it has its cons in others. So we then looked at all of these options, which I'll kind of go through in the next slide. So using the same evaluation criteria that I summarized a couple of slides ago, looking at social, cultural, natural, technical, and financial, we then weighted all of these. And that's what we can see here. So again, based on the application of that same evaluation matrix, alternative site concept 6 was determined to be the preferred design option. While it was not the least cost alternative, it best addressed other key criteria and more fully met the problem and opportunity objectives. So we then reviewed the sub option A versus B a little bit. So, we certainly can look at that a little bit more. So again, the reason for a lot of these items is that, for example, social environment, even though we're on the same site, there is the potential again that in the future, the building itself here with these concepts would actually have to be expanded to include the treatment. So that would not be ideal. In terms of cultural, you can see it's about the same because everything is on the same site. So generally speaking, not much of a difference there, nor in natural environment for the same reason. In terms of technical, as you can see, as the technology got a little bit better, if you can see my cursor, we went from least to moderate to really having a system that can meet today's needs for regulation with the ability to implement additional treatment if and when needed in the future. So it really scored well on technical. Flip side, you can almost see the reverse to some extent on the costing and whatnot. So, it's certainly not the cheapest alternative, but we try not to make decisions that are just based on cost. It has to have that best balance of what we call the environment, as I defined before. And for all of these reasons, alternative 6 was determined to be the preferred option. And again, so we then looked at that a little bit further, because remember, 6 has both A and B to it. All right, so based on the initial well water quality testing, it was determined that concept 6A, which was split stream treatment, provided the ability to implement future treatment processes if and when required to meet regulatory changes, and provided a lower cost solution compared to concept 6B. And the big reasons on that is that where we think we may potentially need ion exchange in the future, if it's ever needed, we just need to knock things down a little bit more. So full stream treatments really should not be necessary based on what's being potentially proposed by the province. So really that was the big difference. Because of that, we really don't want to put more equipment that's absolutely necessary. It also increases not just the capital cost, but the long-term operation, because you've got more backwash water to deal with. You've got more media sort of material that you got to regenerate and replenish with time and whatnot. And then there's several other opportunities. So 6A still was able to address system storage. It provided the ability to potentially mitigate transient issues. And the reason for that is that we've got the storage right near, we've got pumping nearby, and the heavy user in the system's not too far away. So we're able to really provide that sort of pressure balancing in the system using this solution, which was part of the objectives. The catalytic iron removal, these are pressure filters essentially, is preferred over iron sequestering because the concentrations of iron and manganese in the raw water are a little bit too high. So while sequestering does work, there's a tipping point that you really want to try to treat it and get it filtered out of the water and not just keep it in solution in the distribution system. The on-ground reservoir was also the lower cost option versus in-ground. It is usually about 25 to 40% more expensive to build storage in-ground, and that's probably still on the low end. And there's longer term operational challenges to access storage if you're doing maintenance or cleanouts when it's underneath the building. It's a little bit in terms of confined space and whatnot. This option, as I noted, even though it's split stream, there's still the option to not really worry about implementing it on day one. The water right now meets regulatory requirements. I want to note that even iron and manganese, these are aesthetic objectives. They're not dangerous in terms of consumption. So the ability to implement ion exchange if and when needed is still maintained with the sub-option 6A, which is the design option that is. And then as I noted here, why a higher in capital cost, it best achieves the overall servicing objectives. So an overall summary of this sort of entire preferred alternative design includes the following elements. So the improvements would take place at the North Optimist Park, as noted, that had the best production well with the highest capacity to meet not just today's demands, obviously, which are met, but to really supplement the supply that Tavistock needs to suit growth. The new system will use the on-site decentralized treatment solution. So rather than the centralized, which could get a little bit tight with the existing site near the elevated tower, we're going to look at the decentralized, and that the new water plant will use concept 6A as the design concept / layout for the new facility. So these were the sort of overall steps that I hopefully have been able to explain to everyone on the call today. So as part of the EA process, it's important to identify other steps that need to be done along the process prior to or as part of the later implementation phase. So that's obviously the construction phase and whatnot. And so we laid out a few other items that the county would be looking at. So in terms of wildlife and habitat, any sort of species at risk that are identified, we need to confirm that they're not present at the proposed site. Obviously, any sort of construction and long-term operation has to consider noise. You got the short-term noise during construction, but also things like generators and even the humming of buildings. That's all considered in design element to make sure that adjacent properties aren't bothered by any sort of, background noise. Aesthetics is obviously another element here, is trying to integrate it. It is a municipal facility, but there's ways to kind of set it back, as you saw on the plan there, and not have it in line, let's say, with the houses or whatnot. But, you know, these are all things that, again, as the county evolves the process later on, it'll be, you know, something that gets considered. Archaeological resources. So we do need to make sure that all sites, even if we think they're disturbed, that we confirm that they are. And if not, that a stage one's undertaken. So that would be the next step. Short-term construction impacts, I mentioned noise already, and vibration, air, and these are all things that are part of the ESR document, so that as the baton's kind of handed to the next process, which is detailed design, everyone remembers that these are things we got to consider to kind of minimize the disruption to everybody. And then lastly, the source water protection. So we are advancing a new well, so that's going to require an amendment to the source water protection policies and whatnot, or reporting rather, for this area. So that would be another thing that gets evolved as the process continues. Speaking of the process and next steps, we're nearing the end here. It's actually second last slide. So next steps in terms of our process is to review and respond to any comments that we receive. You know, this is obviously one platform here, is to hear back from you already. Wait for your comments as well that may follow within the period of review time that we're asking for. We're going to continue to engage with our Indigenous communities, the public like yourselves, and a lot of our regulatory agencies that we've engaged since the initiation of the project. Through this whole process, we're going to confirm the preferred design. So again, what we're presenting here is the preliminary preferred design concept, because it is meant to be a collaborative process and transparent. And then following all that is prepare the environmental study report, or ESR, and then get it out there for the mandatory 30-day public comment period. So you can kind of see all the process here as we kind of work towards it. And then that takes me to the very last slide, which, you know, we kind of started this with this, is that we do want to hear from you. We want to make sure that, you know, any sort of concerns are shared with us, so that we can incorporate this in the study and in the confirmation of the preferred solution and design solution for that matter. So on that note, I will park it on this slide and see if there's any questions. I do want to thank everyone for your time and letting me go through that. David, you got your hand up.
Oh, I just wanted to point out that there's no comments currently in the Q&A, but that doesn't mean you couldn't add something if you wanted to, and we can get to it as we do work through the comment portion of the evening. I do see one raised hand now, so just Julie Welker, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, everyone. Nelson, that was a great presentation, really well laid out, so I really appreciate that. My name is Julie Welker. I'm the Source Water Program Manager with Thames Sydenham. So of course, I really like that you pointed out about the source water and the importance of that. So I just want to ensure that, you know, as part of the source water program, we're going to ensure that the town's water is further protected by protecting what happens around the well. So when the preferred option, when it's beyond the scope of this EA, of course, but now that the preferred option is complete, you know, I just want to remind the county to engage our office really early so that we can work through that modeling process and delineate that wellhead protection area, because of course policies could affect the land use directly around that well, just to ensure that that water is protected. So just feel free to reach out at any point in time. But yeah, we're here. So this is good. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks, Julian. I know the county, this has been an item that they brought up and they understand through their own policies as well, in terms of engaging with the conservation authorities to make sure this stuff's all buttoned up. The ESR will have a little bit more information because we are doing a high-level screening of potential risks. So that'll be kind of that first step as well, to start to guide that next step of additional sort of study work and updates. And I'm not sure if either, Tony or Don or Mackenzie, anyone from the county wants to add to that, but feel free.
Well, I'll just say the county's well aware of the source water protection program and are quite active and have been a leader in that since the early days when source water protection was first developed. And we understand the importance of it for the new well.
We'll just leave the comments open. You can certainly mull things over if you want to. We can also go back to any slide if you wanted to see something again. That's definitely a possibility. We definitely are, sometimes putting a map up. We can show you some, or show you the map so you can kind of see the area in context. I am seeing a hand, I believe, from Ken. Did you have a comment, Ken? You can unmute yourself, or I can do that for you. Doesn't look like it's letting me unmute, but you should be able to. Now. There you go. Yep. Go ahead, Ken.
Or maybe it's not. I'm not sure.
It is showing unmuted right now, so.
Yeah.
Maybe just a microphone issue.
Possibly.
And then if you are having trouble with it, you can always type. There's a chat function as well along the top bar. If the microphone's not working, you could always write a question in there, just a text, and we can definitely get your comment a different way.
And by all means, for everybody on the call, if you prefer to correspond after the meeting or whatnot, feel free. I mean, it's meant to be one point throughout this, and then of course we've got up to October 6th, we'd like to get comments, and then there's of course comments on the ESR. So whatever your preference is. But I think we're having some issues on audio in hearing you, Ken.
Yeah, and also likewise, if anyone did need to step off, you're more than welcome. And provide comments a different way, that's fine as well. So just wanted to let you know that.
I think we have a question that came in on the chat.
Yeah, we can just read that for the group too if you can't see it. The comment is best case planning, when would the county look to proceed with the construction? It is a good question. I know at the earlier meeting, we said that this is very much at the preliminary level. It's identifying the concept. There are other phases that would happen after the EA. So the concept goes to detailed design to address some of those additional, like identify the mitigation and actual drawings. And then there's also a tendering process that'll have to happen after that design is complete. So we are looking at a future date. I see Tony came off mute. If you wanted to.
Yeah. So I think this is after this public consultation center. There's a period of time where comments can still come in, and they will be consolidated and seriously considered. And the project will then, Stantec will proceed to compile everything into the environmental study report, which I think Nelson is scheduled, but is supposed to be, I think, close to the end of this year, or early into next year. I'm not sure exactly where it sits on the schedule. And then it gets filed for review. And after that, it would, assuming that everything is accepted, it would go to a detailed design phase, which would be over I think Don Ford's here, but I think it's a year's period, and construction would be in 2 years' time. Don, do you want to add a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think what we're doing in the master plan is we have design over 2 years. I think we also have some time in there for site development and also bringing up to a production well, make sure we're going to get what we want. And we kind of have it earmarked for 27, 28 as the construction years. So that's what I see in the master plan schedule right now. So I guess it'd be in operation at the Q4 2028, I guess.
Thank you very much for the comment. Just go around the room again if anyone has anything else, any other comments or questions for the group.
David, there's a little red sign on chat. Does that mean there's another comment?
Looks like there's a chat, somebody writing in again, so. The red lights for the recording. Oh, we do have another question. Just site, I'm just going to read it off and then we can discuss. So site W3 seems to be preferred only as the only site now, with the township having right-of-way access. How is this going to be addressed? Alternatively, could the well not be moved slightly west onto Optimist land, which would be the same water draw? So just open that up to.
Well, I think the county is aware of that matter from the PCC1. I think the township owns the property, and for the purposes of the Class EA study, the county wanted to let it proceed the way it is without making changes on that regard, and that issue could certainly come forward through the comments and maybe dialogue with the county as this study proceeds. There's always a risk too with a well if we move the location. The Tavistock aquifer has a bedrock aquifer, and the fractures that supply water at W3, the preferred site, are very good, as Nelson had mentioned. And if the location is moved, there's always a risk that those fractures aren't necessarily intersected. So we try to, at this point at least, the preference is to have the existing well as the source as part of this study.
Thank you. There's another comment in the chat. I like the idea as a whole. I think it was well planned and thorough. I am encouraged with the scope and size of the new water treatment plant. Thanks for that comment. Just waiting, another comment coming through. All right, just the comment arrived. So the comment is, with a new direct pipeline to the water tower, how would this improve pressure balance to the cheese factory, out of curiosity? So I think this is in reference to an earlier slide where it showed some possible routes to the water tower, but Nelson, maybe you just want to explain that.
Sure. Yeah, so if you could still see the screen here, and now just to make sure, let's go back here. So here's where I broke out the centralized versus decentralized. So it was the centralized that had the dedicated, and it's actually likely a raw water main that would go out to the centralized site, get treatment there. Although, like I said, very, very tight site. With the decentralized, basically the treatment again is at W3, and the connection would be right out to Hope Street. So with the preferred solution, the rationale why that can better balance pressures is, first of all, the storage and the supply is closer to that large user. The other element here is that because there's currently some pressure fluctuations on when they ask for water, meaning that sometimes they essentially open a valve for lack of a better way of explaining it, and then close the valve rapidly. Sometimes that causes some pressure waves in the system. By having the facility a little bit closer, through design, they can look to mitigate those pressure fluctuations a little bit more. So just wanted to explain, yeah, it was actually the dedicated line to the tower was the centralized solution, which was not actually the preferred.
Yeah, so it's not, so that that pipe isn't part of the preferred solution. So it's really the focus is on the site. So
yeah,
just
you can see it a bit here, like this blue line here would be representing more or less the water main, treated water main exiting the building and then tying into essentially tying into the existing water main on Hope Street as the high level concept. Yeah.
Maybe for the second part of that comment, Nelson, it's about, taking a step back. It's talking about pressure balance with other users. Maybe you can explain a little bit about how water coming from the site addresses pressure for nearby businesses or further to that concept, I guess, as the water leaves the site.
Well, yeah, I think the big thing is just the fact that we're also enhancing system storage. And the reason for that is you want to make sure you've got enough kind of treated water stored somewhere so that when you get into what we call peak hour demands, more specifically, that because sometimes these demands could exceed what the water treatment plant can treat. That's why you want this sort of storage set aside that it's ready to go to the customer. And by having that a little bit further out and not having all the water eggs in one basket, meaning in the centralized area, now we've got both storage and pumping in another quadrant of Tavistock. So for that area there, as the distribution gets longer and wider and further away from the source, you normally see pressure reduction, assuming the topography is the same. And this just allows a little bit more robustness in that area of town.
Not sure if you can see that comment, Nelson, but there's a follow-up. What volume would the storage capacity be?
Okay, so I may have to call upon the county as well, because I know there's some fine tuning going on with other studies. I believe, actually, I'm not sure, Tony, Don, or Mackenzie, do you recall the number I had in my mind? I think we have a deficiency. Is it going to be at about 800?
Tony speaking. I don't know for sure, Nelson, but either Don or Paul Ibergen probably do.
Yeah, and it don't mean to put you on the spot here. We can always take a comment like this away and look into that a little bit further, and mull it over. I'm sure there's a lot of factors that go into a decision like that. So,
and I know Mackenzie's on. I know she just put her camera on, and she's been also working on the master plan with Don. So a lot of this again is we're handshaking with the other studies because they're looking at things at a broader level in some ways, and that's why we may actually have something that we can fine tune a little bit here. It is pending some other stuff, but I know maybe either Don or Mackenzie could shed some light on that.
Sure, I can speak to some of it. There is a slight deficit with the storage, and so that has to be addressed. I think it's in the range of what you spoke of. But the other thing here is with the contact piping, and Nelson, I don't know if you want to discuss that, but that alleviates the need for storage to form for contact time. So maybe you can speak a bit to that, how that helps as well. And then as far as the sizing of it, this physically will look like, I'm imagining it like a above ground storage tank, much like we have an Interkip, sort of the blue steel glass line sort of tank, similarly probably sized. But I don't know what the specific diameter there is you have, or how high you would estimate it to be, Nelson. But you're obviously going to provide more than just what the deficit would be, 2046. So. But maybe you can speak to that.
And definitely I do want to speak, because that little serpentine line I didn't really highlight, but this is important when we talk about storage. So this is something that the county and a lot of other municipalities and water operations this is all in-ground piping. So you see it throughout all the options. It's essentially the same. But what happens is the water passes through here. It's injected with sodium hypochlorite, passes through all this piping. And the intent is that the way disinfection works with chlorine is it's through what we call contact time. So the longer chlorine is in contact with water, the longer it's got to kill or inactivate things like viruses, which is the key thing that we achieve in Ontario to make our water safe. So the reason this is important is the more you do it through a system like this, the more that any storage that goes in is more fully dedicated to what we call like EQ diffuse storage equalization, because you then don't really need the tank to be doing the disinfection. You can basically draw down within reason and use that to supply the customers as much as possible. So it is all kind of brought together as part of the net solution. Thanks, Don, for bringing that up, because I did kind of miss that. And it is part of that whole discussion in terms of fine tuning the design concept as it takes the next step.
All good questions so far. Thanks so much for participating. I don't know, Nelson, did you want to throw up the preferred alternative again, just so people have another chance to look at it? Just the sort of the description of 6A, just so people are aware of where we landed on it.
Yeah, no, good point, David. It's a bit more zoomed in as well. So.
Yeah.
Just as a note too, we are showing a connection to maintain some access to the trail space as well into the park off Hope Street.
There's one comment coming through the chat. I hazard to say anything about it. I don't want to scare the comment away. Thank you, Brad. Just an individual identified. He just said, "Thank you for the information tonight. Well worth signing in." So always nice to hear that. And another individual is asking if would it be possible for an in-person meeting regarding this? Technical challenges make it difficult. Yeah, I definitely hear you on the technical, the microphone issue. I'm sorry you're experiencing that. It definitely, the telephone numbers are included in the presentation, so you can always give a call, and then you can talk it through. That may be a good solution following the meeting, or alternatively, you could ask for somebody to give you a call, and we can talk it through if you have further comments.
Yeah,
I
sure.
appreciate you sticking with it and typing as much as you have, though. Thanks so much. And we'll flash that phone number for you at the end as well. And another comment just came in. I'll read it for the group. How have you involved the cheese factory to date? They're a very important business in this community. So I can speak broadly to the public engagement so far. So we have done a notice of study commencement at the beginning of the project, and notifications for each of the public consultation centers, and individuals that have identified themselves. We've included on the mailing list as well to receive notices. So we've been keeping people informed that way, and also the Speak Up Oxford page has been live since the project began. So we have provided some notices to some businesses in the area as well. But in terms of the cheese factory, we'll have to look at that one. But we have been keeping individuals to date in a number of methods.
And I'm not sure if the county wants to speak to this, but I know in talking to Paul in the past, there has been some I don't want to call it issues, but challenges sometimes with the way they need water. So I think this is really meant to be able to mitigate those sort of impacts. Certainly not looking for sure at reducing servicing or impacting servicing to them, but making sure that the ability to service them can also balance by mitigating some of the pressure issues we're having in the system. And Don, I'm not sure if you turn your camera on to add to that as well.
Right, they have made contact to county staff and water and wastewater and expressed their needs. We've heard them, and they have needs with water, but also with wastewater discharge, and they have plans for the future and things that they're doing. It's sort of like business decisions and things they're making, and so. We have been making them aware of this. I don't see them actively participating maybe in the public consultation centers, but maybe they are on the call tonight. I don't know, but they have talked to myself and to Mackenzie and to others. So they're aware of it. Yeah.
There's another comment that came in. Is it known as a percentage of total water demand in town how much the cheese factory consumes approximately?
It's probably one for Don.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably more for my technical supervisor, Mackenzie. I know they are a substantial player in Tavistock. There's no doubt about that. They use a substantial amount of water. And Mackenzie, you probably have the numbers in the top of your head, so I'll leave it to you.
Oh, you're on mute, Mackenzie.
Oh, sorry, everybody. I can speak to that, though there are plans, as Dawn has kind of alluded to, with that large user in the community to change some of that demand over time. They may have changes in business practice, so they do fluctuate, but it is a substantial amount of our average daily flow, and it does fluctuate day to day based on their operations. What the total percentage is, that's probably as close as to what I can give for an estimate in that case. But in terms of consulting with them related to this municipal class EA as well as other ones and the master plan process, they have been very engaged and informed with our group, and they are aware of all of the projects, so that we can ensure that as we go forward with these decisions, we're making sure that it meets our community members' needs across the board.
Thanks.
not seeing any additional comments coming through the chat, but thank you for those responses. Appreciated. Just wanted to point out again, if individuals do, have any comments, let us know. And there's other ways that you can write them in or take your time and call us. There's lots of opportunities there. But if you do need to go, definitely, take the opportunity, and that's definitely fine. But I just wanted to mention that as well. So we'll wait around for a few minutes, a few more minutes, just to see if there's anything else that comes in. Definitely thank you so much for the comments so far.
And I'm just going to put it back to this here as well, with the emails and phone numbers and whatnot, just to build upon the fact that it's not meant that this is the last opportunity, certainly, to ask questions or provide comments.
Are there any other comments or questions? If not, we can definitely, monitor the chat afterwards. That Q&A function will still be live, but also the Speak Up Oxford page for anyone that does have any questions that you think of after the call. You can always log into there and let us know if you have anything else that comes to mind. So that's on the screen there. You can click the link, and we will also look to get the presentation onto the website as soon as we can. Did any of the other attendees that are still on the call, do you have any other questions or for the group? If not, I'll look to the county to see if we want to close the recorded portion of the of this meeting, and we can always monitor the chat if anything comes in after the fact. But I think if there's no other comments coming in, I think we're probably okay to close this session. All right, thanks everyone for coming, and really appreciate the dialogue on this.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.